Test 1, 2, 3. Thank you for tuning in to Wine and Watch. It's so exciting to have so many people here tonight to discuss some serious matters that are happening. It's always exciting for us to get together in the chat and talk about various matters. This week, it was a tough week because of what happened with Michael. In fact, this live we're going to dedicate to Michael, who lost his life because of the troubles associated with leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses and shunning. First, we're going to talk about a matter that's happening that's pretty urgent within the ex Jehovah Witness community. There are many people that are being abused as Jehovah's Witnesses and going through various situations. And our hearts go out to each and every one of you. We know it's tough. However, we also have people in the ex Jehovah Witness community that are pretending to be who they aren't. We have people pretending to be Bethelites that are contacting the channel, and when you try to validate them, they're not Bethelites. In fact, recently, in the case with Lloyd Evans, there was a situation that occurred with Becca and a guy named Marco, and some have come forward questioning whether they really exist or not. Well, this is a pandemic of its own because it's not only happening in the ex Jehovah Witness community, it's also happening throughout social media in general. Previously, it was brought to my attention that the gentleman that died, named Kevin Samuels, had been associated with Jehovah's Witnesses within his lifetime. In fact, we have an individual that's going to be coming on the show that's going to tell us about his experience within his congregation. So that's going to be very exciting. But I'm going to show you a case of an individual, and this is from Kevin Samuel's attorney. He says that this young lady that's pretending to be his daughter is not his real daughter. Can you imagine that? In the case of someone dying, an individual poses to be your daughter. We've seen it happen in the ex Jehovah Witness community. It's very dangerous because it could jeopardize a good name because people tend to believe things. Sometimes people only watch a video for a second or two, they gain an impression, and they don't come back to sort out the truth. So we're going to start off this live looking into, I'm going to allow you to listen to this young lady that's pretending to be Kevin Samuel's daughter and notice how believable she sounds. But Kevin Samuel's attorney came forward and said this is not his daughter and they don't know who this young lady is. In fact, recently at one of the theme parks, I believe in Florida, a young man fell to his death. And I saw on the news where a lady was out there pretending to be his cousin. She had set up GoFundMe's. She was receiving money through Cash App and didn't know him from the man on the moon. But she had so many people consoling her. We have to be mindful of this in the ex Jehovah Witness community. But let's listen in.
That I've been wanting to talk about for a very, very, very long time, especially when I was like really at the peak of my career in network marketing, because you get so many people who talk to you about their problems, their life issues, going through depression and anxiety and just all around just life. And it's always been that thing where I just felt like I could not talk about because I was really just putting other people before myself. I was trying to protect the image of my dad, not just because he is a figure in the community and that far. But what I do always remember is that I always felt like I was second. I always felt like...
Do you hear her crying? She sounds really believable that she's his daughter, but she isn't. Tell us what you're drinking. What kind of wine are you drinking in the chat below as we listen?
I didn't matter. See, look, I'm about to cry. And I told myself I'm not gonna cry about like me and my dad not having a relationship anymore, but just talking about some of the things that have affected. My dad was physically
You could just hear the crocodile tears falling.
There, but he was never mentally or emotionally there. And that is an issue within itself. I'm not going to talk about how my dad grew up because I have no idea. Every time I've tried to talk to him to...
Of course you don't have an idea. It's not her father.
Get him to open up so that I can understand him. He just made jokes. Like, I remember a couple of months ago, I was like, Dad, did you ever deal with any traumas growing up like that made you who you are? And he was like, well, that one time your Uncle D, he stuck me with a diaper pin when he was changing my diaper when I was like 2. Like, he just takes things as jokes. I don't know if it's because as how most men are, they don't like to open up. I don't know. I really don't care. Because I just feel like what you deal with growing up, you have the ability to decide how you're going to use that. You can use it to hurt people, or you can use it to say, you know what, I don't want to instill that in the people in my life. And you just keep it moving. So I primarily spent a lot of time at my dad's mother's house growing up because my sister didn't like going over there. She hated it.
Notice she didn't say grandmother. She said my dad's mother.
And I loved it because not only did I just absolutely love my grandmother and her husband, but because I was the only one there, I always got the attention there that I did not get at home. So I felt loved. I felt all of that. And when my grandmother died when I was 10 years old, I just became really depressed.
Now, you notice how believable she sounds, right? So that's why I say we have to be cautious in the ex-Jehovah Witness community, because people can really play different characters and they'll use these type of strategies to assassinate someone's character and not even know the person, even in the time of death. This is crazy.
For 9 years, I dealt with depression. I dealt with a lot of anxiety. I used to have panic attacks like in my sleep, waking up, just feeling like I couldn't breathe.
Hello, Natalie. How are you doing? Cheers to you too. J-Dub, drinking vitamin water. Good for you. Jim, nice to see you too. Rochelle says a beer. Don't have any wine tonight. Sam Adams, good for you. Great. Renee, as Alexander would say, she's a fake baby. Exactly.
And it just was really bad because I had to watch her disintegrate, like literally. She had pancreatic cancer and she died about 2.5 years after she was diagnosed. So it wasn't anything fast. And I think sometimes the slower deaths are just as bad as the fast ones because you literally watch somebody get.
She's saying she watched her grandmother die with pancreatic cancer. This is crazy.
Really, really bad. I became suicidal because I just felt like the one person that I never had to question their love for me was gone. Yeah, I just always felt like I was second. One of the things that my dad used to do that really bothered me, and he actually laughed about it in Sunday's incident and basically kind of threw his hands up as if it was like, whatever, like that's what, he literally said, that's what you're mad about. I remember growing up, he grabbed me by my hair, and in the midst of doing that, threw my head up against the car window. And I just remember thinking to myself, what did I do wrong? And you're talking about somebody, I didn't even get whoopings, I didn't get punishment, I didn't get grounded, I didn't get any of that. Because I was a good kid. I had a smart mouth sometimes because I was just too smart for my own.
Renee says she's drinking nice water.
Oh, good, but I was a good kid. So to not even get whoopings and to have something like that happen was really traumatic.
So again, Kevin Samuels was associated with Jehovah's Witnesses, and this is a young lady pretending to be his daughter right after his death. How sad.
And I remember when we got home, when I got out the car, he threw me up against the car probably one of the reasons why I have a bad back. My back is horrible. And that was that. I just remember hating him and feeling like the person that's supposed to protect me is not.
Leave your comments below. I might unpack how I feel all about
All
what you
right,
said
so
in this
this is the
audio
clip
clip
that we
in
were
the
able to
private
look at
group. And I'm going to catch everybody on the next
from another
broadcast.
channel
What are your
involving your
thoughts?
daughter. All right, so moving on, we have some announcements from Jehovah's Witnesses, some leaked letters that I'm going to go over. Notice number 4, posting material on websites and social media. Now, in this letter was from a year ago, but they reposted it and gave the information again to Jehovah's Witnesses. But number 4, they're telling Jehovah's Witnesses about posting things online. Well, it's been a year later, and we know we get a lot of leaked information as well as we see a lot of videos. So evidently the friends are not listening, but this is what the society wants the Jehovah's Witnesses to obey. Point 4. While we may share information from the organization's website by sending a link to individuals, we should not post on the internet any artwork, electronic publications, trademarks, music, photos, videos, or articles from our websites. This would include theocratic programs on jw.org or JW Stream, such as the monthly broadcasts, congregation meetings, circuit assemblies, and conventions. If you have posted such material on any website or social media without permission, please remove it. More information on the topic can be found in the April 2018 issue of the Watchtower, pages 30 to 31, and on jw.org under Terms of Use. Okay, so Jehovah's Witnesses do not want their followers or the congregation members to be posting anything online. So that's very interesting as to why that they would take that stance. But let's look at the announcements just released this month of June. So we have the leaked announcements for June 2nd, 2022, for elders in the United States Branch Territory. Number 1, adjustments to activities related to the COVID-19 pandemic. We warmly commend you for your sincere efforts to apply the principles provided by the organization during this global pandemic. Until recently, steps have been taken to avoid as many risks as possible to prevent cases of COVID-19. However, vaccines and booster shots have been provided to be effective against COVID-19. Additionally, in many places, effective treatments are now available. As a result, hospitalizations and deaths have generally decreased, especially among those fully vaccinated. Therefore, it seems appropriate to take a living with COVID approach. In view of this, in addition to resuming all aspects of public ministry with the exception of door-to-door witnessing, further adjustments are being made to activities related to the pandemic. Direction related to the COVID-19 pandemic for bodies of elders will be updated with these adjustments in due course. Recently, I posted a video of the mayor of New York City. He was so happy with Jehovah's Witnesses because of the 5,000 or so in the Bethel family throughout the state of New York. The article said that 99% of them were vaccinated. So Jehovah's Witnesses are setting the example in getting vaccinated as Bethelites throughout the Bethel family. And quite frankly, I don't know if they really had a choice or not in order to stay in their assignment. Number 2, discontinuation of COVID-19 location-specific direction. COVID-19 location-specific direction will no longer be provided on jw.org. As you consider the impact of the pandemic in your area, you may find it helpful to consult the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention CDC COVID data tracker. All right, so Jehovah's Witnesses are saying, don't look to us. You're on your own. Go to the CDC to figure out what you should do as far as COVID is concerned. Number three, use of the Kingdom Hall for additional meetings and events. In addition to the in person congregation meetings, the Kingdom Hall can now be used for all the previously approved activities. This includes use of the Kingdom Hall for weddings, funerals, meetings for field service, Kingdom Hall dedications, elders meetings, investigating reports of serious wrongdoing. So, investigating reports of serious wrongdoing. This is something that obviously they have a lot of action with people doing wrong things, as well as meetings of judicial and reinstatement committees. The use So, as former Jehovah's Witnesses, we know that wrongdoings leads to judicial committee meetings where three brothers meet with you to discuss your sins, and they judge and make a determination whether or not you should be excommunicated or not, disfellowship, or get the axe. Of face masks is strongly encouraged for all those activities at the Kingdom Halls. Number four, in person meetings for field service. It will be left to the judgment of the body of elders if any arrangements should be made for in person meetings for service. If the elders decide to do so, all such arrangements may. T, you're exactly right. They say use worldly guidance. J Dub says wrongdoings. Correct. Natalie says they should change judicial meeting term to sexual interrogation of children. Exactly. And studying scripture says they are taking direction from the worldly government and not God. That's a great point. May include an option for publishers to tie into the meeting remotely. Regarding the use of private homes for meetings for field service, all in the home should be comfortable using their home in this way, and no one should feel pressured to do so. The use of face masks is strongly encouraged for meetings for service, including those held in private homes. Number five. And I just want to add that this information came from Mark O'Donnell. Mark O'Donnell covers a lot of cases. He's on Twitter. He does excellent work. He covered Michael Pincava and Colin Scott case where they were on trial because they covered up a child abuse of a 6-year-old girl. And because of their negligence, the girl went on to be abused for 12 years. So Mark actually flew out there. I think he flew out there 3 or 4 times and actually sat in the courtroom. So I definitely take my hat off to Mark, and I'd like to encourage you guys to follow him on Twitter. Hour requirements for regular and special pioneers. The hour requirement continues to be suspended. Number six, shepherding visits. In person shepherding visits are now permitted. The use of face masks is encouraged. Number seven, cleaning and maintenance activity organized by the congregation. While vaccination is recommended, it is not required to participate in cleaning and maintenance of the Kingdom Hall organized by the congregation. However, the use of face masks is strongly encouraged. Number eight, So if you're going to be cleaning the Kingdom Hall, you don't have to be vaccinated, but just make sure you wear your mask. Congregation files. These can now be returned to the Kingdom Hall if it's deemed safe to do so. So that's interesting that a lot of the elders have the personal files of individuals in their homes, and they're being encouraged to bring those files back to the Kingdom Hall. And these files that somehow go missing in various countries, they've been told to throw the files away. So we see they're asking for the files to come back to the hall. So from then. All right. So this is Michael. And earlier in the week, I showed you a video where Michael, the entire video of him at least speaking about his life as a Jehovah's Witness and how he ended up being shunned. And he recently took his own life, and we're really sad. In fact, we're dedicating this live to Michael. But in this particular video, the reason why I'm going to show this snippet is to show you how the elders take control of people's lives so much that they commandeer your wife and your children. Yes, they take over your family. So in Michael's case, he woke up because of various things that he learned. especially with the testimony of the Jeffrey Jackson, the member of the governing body, when he stood before the Royal Commission and gave his testimony. This was a key point to Michael waking up to the machinations of Watchtower the Great. Well, when Michael revealed how he felt, what did the brothers do? Well, they formed a judicial committee that we just learned about, that they're opening up kingdom halls to make sure they get those judicial committees done. But what happened is the brothers started to attack Michael in a very unique way, and that's by going to his wife and asking questions and increasing pressure on his wife. It's almost like they challenge his manhood. Can you imagine that? You're the head of the home, but because you change your mind about the religion, the brothers feel like that they can come now and tell your wife, well, you don't really have to stay with this guy. He changed his mind about Jehovah, and they start to poison or demonize the man. Imagine that. Imagine now the brothers are talking to your children and saying your daddy doesn't love Jehovah anymore and blase, blase. That's terrible. And that's something that we all need to speak up about. And I saw, this is alleged, I saw on the video, I think it's the same video that I took this snippet from, where one of the elders that actually worked on Michael's case told his wife, you can marry one of us. So, what kind of craziness is going on in these organized religions? And now the world is calling many of these so called religions cults. So as you listen to Michael, notice what they did to his family, right? Once he's no longer going to the meetings, how they approach his wife and children.
I quit going to the Kingdom Hall. I've been asked to go to my own judicial committee. I refuse to do so. They have tried to come between my wife and my children, saying that my children are fatherless because I don't go to the meetings, that I no longer believe in their doctrine. First of all, I'm not a deadbeat dad. I work 80, 90 hours a week to care for my wife and my children. I still am a believer in Jesus. I'm not an atheist. I know many that leave Watchtower, they turn to that, and that's their privilege. That's their right. We were born with free will.
We're going to pause for a second. Alex says Pencava and Colon deserved 100 years. Natalie says Pencava and Colon make me sick. The elders in my congregation are no better. The sheep, they think they are saints. T says, I remember 3-day conventions at the Cow Palace were so boring. I second that emotion.
But myself, I still believe in the Bible and in Jesus Christ. One other doctrine.
For those of you that are just coming in, Michael is a former elder in the congregation that his eyes were open to the truth, the supposed truth. And he learned so much that he changed his mind, but his life went into a downward spiral because of how the shunning and all of the machinations of Watchtower the Great, that he recently took his life with suicide. And we know that this is a tough case, but we have to stand up for Michael. If you can't do it for yourself, do it for Michael.
Was all of my life, I was taught that Jesus Christ was my mediator. And then when that teaching changed, that those 8 men in New York City were my mediator between me and my Heavenly Father.
Studying scripture says James 4:2 calls those elders murderers. Exactly. Natalie says the new Jehovah Witness thing is of a spouse wakes up, they meddle in the marriage now. Marriage is no longer first. Exactly.
It disgusted me. And so I left. And at this time, I'm shunned, been shunned by people that I've been friends with that I truly love. I don't have a problem with the rank and file Jehovah's Witness. Still love them. If they called me tonight and said they needed help, as a child of Christ, I would go do that for them. But I can no longer accept or be under the rule of the 8 governing body members up in New York City, or Warwick as they are at now. My wife had been approached
Listen to this part about his wife.
by elders, and she was told that she should leave me because I'm mentally diseased, that I'm a danger to my children and to her spiritually. They have had other people contact her, other men, and I squashed that. That's not happening. Now, my wife is a wonderful woman. She's a God-fearing woman. We made our vows to each other before God, not to the Watchtower organization. And so I don't want to go into a lot of the detail for legal reasons of what's happened, but there will be no one come between my wife and my children. That is my...
Natalie says family destroyers, exactly. Blood on their hands.
steadfast action right now. But one thing that I want to share is I have a good friend, my best friend, and I won't name his name right now because he's in a mental health facility. To give you a short story, he and his wife were expecting a baby. When the child was born, she would not let him sign the birth certificate because she had been having an affair with an elder in another congregation. She was
What is going on?
not disciplined. This elder was not disciplined, but because my friend was vividly upset, as you can imagine, went and he would go to other elders. He would call the branch. He was disfellowshipped. As a result, he became suicidal, and he did try to take his own life.
Deborah Hines is a case that we're also following, and this is so close. It mirrors her case. Because when you look at the court documents for Deborah Hines, she said that once she had reported her stepfather that was raping her, and he was appointed an elder after the fact, when she complained to the brothers, and some of them were governing body members, they told her that because of his work being so important, allegedly, that she should accept whatever became of his circumstance and with him not being punished. Can you imagine that? And so when she kept talking about it, right, she kept complaining even after the brother says her stepfather was okay. They gave their little judgment. She kept talking about it, so they silenced her. They took away her privileges. So imagine that as a young girl in the congregation. And so many times on Facebook and some of these groups that I'm in, I talk to current Jehovah's Witnesses, and I use cases like Deborah Hines, and I say, look at this case, right? Because sometimes I just post it, and then they come out like wolves to tell me, oh, Jehovah's going to take care of that, boom, boom, whatever. They come up with all these little ways of quieting these serious thoughts in their minds. And so I say, you're talking about this young girl. This girl was your sister in the congregation. Why have you demonized her now? And in some cases, these girls haven't even been disfellowshipped. They were simply molested in the congregation and they stopped going to the meetings. Who wouldn't, right? But they say the girls are bad. Oh, she must have did something wrong or wore a short dress. You know how that goes in the Jehovah Witness community. They want you to wear your skirt a certain length, right? But that's the part that I often tell Jehovah's Witnesses. This is your sister. Why have you made her the enemy, but you make a saint out of the molester? That's terrible.
Now, at this time, I do not know where he's at. He's in protection from himself in a medical facility. But that's just some of the harm that the Watchtower
So not only did our dear brother here, Michael, commit suicide, but he's also talking about his best friend who had a bad experience in the congregation, and he ended up with some serious issues that he had to seek mental help. And he was also suicidal. If you look at the entire video, you'll learn a lot of facts. And go over to Watchtower History, their YouTube channel. You can see the entire video and just see how crazy the story gets.
Society has done to people. My whole life has been turned upside down because
Yeah, definitely turned upside down. Patricia Hines says, how can those elders live with themselves? I am so upset about Michael. I think we all are. I'm very upset. And if you thought I was making videos before, you're gonna see a lot more because of Michael. And I advise all of you to stand up and do something. Danny says a few Miller highlights. Okay. Natalie says Jehovah sees everything, but yet children come to the elders as authority figures to help them. Exactly. And they end up in hot water. Or they end up answering questions that are disgusting. I remember back in Virginia, there was a young girl, maybe around 1993. She had committed an act in a high school, I think down somewhere near Danville, Virginia, or whatever. And the three elders that were handling her judicial committee asked her some inappropriate things that would just absolutely blow your mind. Like, why do you need to know? Are you really getting excited of hearing about? Is this some sort of soft porn for you, hearing what this young girl did? Like, why put her through that? If you need to judge her or do whatever you have to do it and move on. Don't antagonize her or make her answer these crazy questions. And in that case, her father wasn't a Jehovah Witness, so he went to the Kingdom Hall and he was ready to bust a few heads. And quite frankly, who would fault him at being so outraged at what process they put his daughter through and the vile questions that they asked her?
I questioned the doctrine and the procedures of the Watchtower Bible Tract Society. All of my friends that I've ever had, I live in a small town, and I'll walk up to someone and say, "Hey, how are you doing?" And they turn around and look at you and say they can't talk to me, or they'll ignore me. That's not Christian. Jesus taught us to do unto others as we would have men do unto us. And I try my best
Renee says they just reinstate the pedals back in. Exactly.
to follow the golden rule.
All right. So we definitely want to keep Michael and his family in mind, and definitely our condolences goes out to them. And I just ask that each and every one of you consider stepping forward and continuing to press against this big $1 billion corporation that bullies people. And it's a really tough thing when we see a lot of people losing their lives. In fact, last week I posted a video of Laura Stewart, who actually killed her entire family because she was shunned. So this is terrible. It's a lot going on. Now we're going to take a look at the leaked video from the HLC. So this is going to be very interesting. And this video is a governing body member that's actually conducting this meeting. And when you watch it, you'll get a chance to peer into the minds of how these Jehovah's Witness leaders, how they think. Let's check it out.
Have you or a loved one faced a medical emergency or prepared for a serious medical procedure? If so, you know how stressful that can be.
It could be very stressful. My mother, while I was serving at Walk Hill Bethel, died because she did not take a blood transfusion. So this subject is very near and dear to my heart because her situation led to me actually working with the legal department at Bethel and making a lot of discoveries that I never thought I would see in life. And it's just so terrible how people have died let's say maybe back in the 60s and 70s. And then when the new light comes and they change it, well, those people died in vain. If only they had lived beyond when Jehovah's Witnesses came up with new light, they would perhaps still have their life. And my mother was one of those individuals. Had she lived another month after I was able to help them sort through and figure out, because a lot of times when you're a Jehovah's Witness and you're sitting there, I mean, I studied Bethel and I heard all types of talks for years in the congregation. Every year you sign your little proxies and you have your blood card that a lot of you like to use to get discounts at hotels if you're a Bethelite. Well, that might be just a New York thing. But when you face cancer, or like in her situation, and now you're in the room with the doctors and they're talking about a blood transfusion and they're talking about fractions and all of these things, your mind is so cloudy. My mind was so cloudy, I couldn't quite understand what a fraction, addition, multiplying, whatever. It was really tough. But I do know one thing. I know that the light got brighter after my mother died, and my mother died in vain because of that blood transfusion.
Psalm 41:3 promises that Jehovah will sustain us on our sickbed. How does he do this? Not through miraculous cures, but by lovingly providing physical, emotional, and spiritual support. One means of support is the Hospital Liaison Committee arrangement. Today, more than 16,000 brothers serve on or coordinate some 2,000 liaison committees around the world. How do they assist?
Our role is to help doctors and Jehovah's Witnesses to come to a consensus on how to treat the patient without breaking God's law.
In the days of distress, they arrived early on Jared at 11.
Jared was diagnosed with lymphoma cancer in the middle of 1991. We started trying to figure out how we could get him the treatment that he needed, of course, but in no way would we accept a blood transfusion, and neither would Jared. He died in June of 1992. He was at home, and the last thing he said to us was, "Work hard so we can all be together again."
I just want to pause here. This is a great point. Kathy wrote a book about a little boy that she grew up with named Jimmy. And it's a very touching book. I was able to get a copy of it, and I'm actually going through it now. But it's very similar. Jimmy was an individual that Kathy grew up with, and he died at a very young age. And so after he died, the parents were no longer Jehovah's Witnesses and they divorced. That's what my understanding is. But Kathy is going to come on and tell you guys all about it. But just like in this particular case of this young man that passed away, according to Jehovah's Witnesses teaching, he could only come back in the resurrection, according to what the brothers told Kathy. This guy could only come back in the resurrection if his parents remain faithful and loyal to God. Can you imagine that? So that's why she was asking about little Jimmy. Like, how is that fair? How does that work? How come Jimmy can't be judged on his own merit? Jehovah's Witnesses have a lot of crazy teachings that you don't really understand until you look at it with a clear mind, and often after you can stand away from the brainwashing.
Jehovah's Witnesses love their children. Isn't that true?
So this is Mark Sanderson, and he's saying Jehovah's Witnesses love their children. He's a member of the governing body, and this video has been leaked, and we want to thank Lloyd Evans for being the person to obtain this video. We're going to watch it, and you're going to learn a lot about Jehovah's Witnesses and what they think about blood and how they value people's lives.
True. And for that reason, when they're sick or they face some terrible medical problem, we want the very best medical care that we can possibly find for them without the use of blood transfusion. Well, in the following discussion, we're going to discuss some of the common problems that are particularly experienced in dealing with the care of newborns. And then we're also going to review some of the basic principles that are involved in the medical and legal issues that arise in treating minors in general. Now, it's well known that preterm infants in the neonatal intensive care unit receive a greater number of red cell transfusions than any.
T says, I don't know why beards are illegal. Natalie says, I have a friend that almost lost his toddler, and yes, he got a transfusion and his life was saved. He will never forgive the family who wanted his little boy to die. And so that's a big factor, if especially if two parents get a divorce and the primary guardian pushes for the Jehovah's Witness belief and they push for that blood transfusion. Sometimes the father, imagine if the father, like we saw with Michael, and if he's disfellowship, what kind of stance he will have in trying to fight for his child's life. That's really deep when you really stop and think about it.
Other group of hospitalized patients. Isn't that amazing to think of? Now, let's consider two main reasons.
It's so amazing to think of. He just looks at it so nonchalant.
Two main problems that arise in the care of these neonates. Here's the first, the anemia of prematurity. Now, all infants after birth will experience a decrease in their hemoglobin concentration. Why is that? Well, in the womb, the infant is in a situation where there's relatively low levels of oxygen. As soon as it's born,
The way Mark Sanderson, a member of the governing body, is breaking this down, you would think that he's a doctor or he has a PhD or something, right? Isn't that strange? T says some Jehovah Witnesses cheat with their blood doctrine. They eat their steak rare. Exactly. And Danny says, strongly advised to wear a mask means you will land in the judicial if you show up without it. Up to your conscience means do as you please. Exactly.
now it's exposed to an environment where there's oxygen everywhere. And so the tissue oxygenation goes up immediately. And how does the body respond? Well, it stops producing the same level of EPO, and as a result, the blood count starts to drop. Well, that's a normal situation for every newborn infant. Usually they're asymptomatic, there's no problem at all. But what about the premature infant? In the premature infant, this situation is greatly exaggerated. And there is definitely a negative response by the preterm infant to this normal transition.
Again, folks, this video was leaked. It was not intended for everyone to see this, just these gentlemen that or guys that are on the committee. So it's very interesting. You're going to learn a lot of things about what they say in the background.
While the blood count may be very, very low in the premature infant, at the same time, the level of EPO in the bloodstream is also very.
Natalie says, makes me mad. He's not a medical doctor and probably doesn't even have his own kid. Isn't that something?
Very, very low. So there's very little output. Very, very few red cells are being created in this little preterm infant.
Okay, Christine says, my granddaughter was born at 26 weeks. She needed 2 drops of blood to oxygenate her blood. Thank goodness my daughter was not raised a witness. Exactly. And T says, fraudulent doctor. Thanks for all the comments, folks.
But now keep in mind, what is the blood volume of a preterm infant? On average, it's this. This is the full blood volume, 4 to 5 ounces for a preterm infant. If the infant is smaller, it would be even less. So now when you think of this, how could we minimize the risk of transfusion in such premature infants? Well, Here's 4 simple things that can be done. The first one, delay cutting and clamping the umbilical cord. Why? Well,
Oh, that's genius.
if more blood comes down from the placenta into the infant, how much better the situation is. If the baby has more blood inside, less risk of transfusion later. Just common sense, a common sense intervention that will just help to ease the situation later. Here's the second one. Well, now it's only common sense. If this is the full blood volume, we're going to have to restrict phlebotomy. Wouldn't you agree? Because if they're continually taking blood samples, if they're taking large samples, what's going to happen? Well, obviously, this volume is going to be depleted in almost no time. So trying to get the doctors to get out of the habit of just doing routine tests.
Now, keep in mind again, folks that are coming in, this is a governing body member, Mark Sanderson, and he's trying to give a lecture to those on the committee that handle the blood. Natalie says it's like how the governing body misquotes scientists in their watchtower. Christine says, remember, they don't need a full transfusion, just 2 drops kept my granddaughter alive.
And at the same time, as was mentioned earlier, using microsampling, using transcutaneous monitoring, non-invasive testing, all of these things will help to avoid a transfusion later. We've already covered the use of erythropoietic stimulating agents, EPO, darbepoetin. These can be of tremendous help to this premature infant in getting the red cell production going. And even just simple hematinics like iron, folic acid, vitamin B12.
T says he has 0 medical experience.
All of these are going to contribute to getting the blood count up. And finally, just permitting anemia, just tolerating a higher degree of anemia can be a significant contributor to avoiding a transfusion. What's the second cause for so many transfusions in these small infants? Well, it's the...
Rochelle says, so you can take a blood before you're born, but not after, baby and mother.
Hemolytic disease of the newborn. What's that? Well, for a variety of different reasons. A mother may begin to form antibodies that enter the bloodstream of the infant. And these antibodies will cause destruction of the red blood cells of the infant.
Wow, he's very knowledgeable about this, huh? Let's see here. Alex says, Mark Sanderson, why you're a lawyer? Jay says, hi, just got here, but I know this is bullshit.
Now, as these red blood cells are being destroyed, bilirubin is being released. As the bilirubin count begins to go higher and higher, the doctors begin to panic. They're afraid with that high bilirubin count that there is going to be permanent brain damage on the part of the child. We call that, or they call that condition, hyperbilirubinemia. And it's a long word, and basically all it means is a high bilirubin count. Well, what is the doctor going to recommend under that circumstance? Most often, the doctor is going to recommend what's called an exchange transfusion. They're going to ask basically to flush out the blood volume of the infant with the blood of another person. Now, how can we try to avoid that situation? What are some alternatives? Here's 3. Phototherapy. Now, many years ago, that was somewhat revolutionary. But now, in most neonatal intensive care units, phototherapy has become a greatly accepted procedure, and it's widely available. If there is a situation, sometimes in the developing world or in other countries, where there just isn't access
Well, it says, so this clown is smarter than a doctor.
to these very focused phototherapy units, sometimes doctors can just use fluorescent lights And if even that's not available, they can just take the baby out and put it in the sun. Many years
So here you have a baby that's so ill that it may need a blood transfusion. And he's saying you could use perhaps fluorescent lights or put the baby out in the sun.
ago, maybe some of you remember when a baby was called jaundiced. Well, that's the same condition we're talking about here. And the way that people would take care of it years gone by was just put the baby in the sun. That's what all.
All right. So I have a question for all of you guys that are in the audience. What do you think about putting the baby in the sun? This is advice coming from a governing body member of the Jehovah's Witnesses organization. He's one of the top. The only one higher than him is Jesus and Jehovah, they say, but these 8 men, they call all the shots. So what do you think about putting the baby, a sick baby, in the sun?
All of the midwives and others would always do to treat that. The second way that we might avoid a transfusion is using a product called tin-mesoporphyrin. Now, tin-mesoporphyrin is not available presently on the market. It can't be purchased or prescribed. But this product has the ability to block the production of bilirubin.
Natalie says it's witchcraft remedies. T says it's child abuse. Ryan says, yeah, let your baby get sunburn.
And so if the bilirubin count is very high, if tin-mesoporphyrin is given almost immediately, the bilirubin count will begin to drop. So how can you get access to this product if you have a case like that? Well, contact HIS, because there is a compassionate use program that the company has through the FDA to be able to release the product for compassionate use in witness patients. So
Brick says the symbol of life is more important than the life it represents in their universe. And Ryan says he recommended a product you can't even get.
HIS can give you more information as to how you would go about getting it.
Last year, I had the opportunity to interview a man.
And again, we want to thank Lloyd Evans for getting us this information that someone on the committee leaked out to him. So we're very grateful, very gracious for that.
Named Daniel Graves shortly after he had defected from the United States branch office at Walk.
Apostate Pajama says, why is he talking about a product that isn't on the market anymore? And Jay says, it's all about them.
New York. Among other roles during his time working as a Bethelite or Jehovah's Witness volunteer staff member, Daniel told me he'd spent 3.5 years answering calls from HLC elders as an overseer's secretary for the hospital information desk. When I pressed him for the number of Jehovah's Witnesses who had died...
So we're about to get the inside scoop from a former Bethelite. So it's very interesting, some of the things that you'll find him saying. T says compassionate does not apply here. Jehovah's Witness parents are choosing this deadly procedure. Yeah, but why do they choose it? They choose it the same reason why a child chooses what their parents say. Because you grew up in the house with your parents feed you, they keep you warm, right? They protect you. So when they tell you which God to serve, you often follow what your parents say, right? Because you trust them. And so the Jehovah's Witness organization, they use Jehovah as the reason because they're saying Jehovah is telling us to tell you to do this. Well, in fact, even I remember the Watchtower where they said that they're not inspired as many of us would have thought while we were Jehovah's Witnesses. So it's very amazing, right? The different things that we're learning here. Ryan says, hi, T. Okay. Jay says they claim they can get these products, right? Exactly.
Fusing blood over this period, this was his response. Okay. And so in 3.5 years of doing this, are you able to tell us how many Jehovah's Witnesses in the United States died?
It would be very hard for me to put a number on it because not every case comes to the HLC, and not every case that the HLC get comes to the national headquarters. So a lot of things, a lot of the trauma, motorcycle accidents, people
James says he looks like Dr. Bunsen, the governing body member, Dr. Bunsen from the Muppets.
on blood thinners that just quickly bleed out, we would get wind of that. And every week we were abreast of somebody that passed away, or we would get a note by somebody from the HLC that something had happened. But to actually, collate that and down to a funnel and say, this is the actual number, I just don't think that could ever be the case.
Okay. If I can press you,
sure.
Would it be, if there were a number, would it be in the dozens or the hundreds or the thousands?
Per day, per month? Or, I mean, what are we talking about? A
in
year?
the 3.5 year period that you were doing it.
What's up, Jay? How are you doing? Glad to see you on board here. Ryan says, oh God, there's hundreds that die a year. Oh, wow.
Oh, no. Thousands. People, it's very common. I mean, this blood issue, especially with COVID and some other things that we saw there, it played a role at times. And so people.
Renee says that this brother we're seeing here left Bethel last year, and he worked closely with the committee in the department at Bethel, and now he's saying thousands die for not taking blood. I know my mother was one.
We'll go in for what would be a normal valve
Natalie says thousands just in the USA.
Replacement, but then they don't have the blood count or the bone marrow to really create baby RBCs, reticulocytes, and then they just naturally become anemic. So many sickle cell for little children. That was a sad thing because it's just a small crisis. And if you could just get over that hump, they'd be fine.
The third thing that could be done is high-dose neonatal intravenous immune globulin. This may be of help when the immune system is working overtime to destroy these red blood cells.
Okay, so we're listening to the professor who's a governing body member. Jay says, let's see, why is it okay to store someone else's blood for the fraction, but I can't store my own for fractions? It's so stupid. And studying scripture says 1 Timothy 5:14 calls for these men meddlers in the affairs of others. Medical treatment is personal choice. And Natalie says Jay is right.
However, again, because immunoglobulin is a plasma fraction, we'd have to be careful to make sure the family understood the conscience matters that are involved in making that decision. All of you as HLC brothers need to be well familiar with the principles that are found in the Kingdom Ministry insert on safeguarding our children. And you'll probably...
Oh, so now he's so concerned about safeguarding the children. Put your baby out in the sun. Willie says if this bunch of clowns had only any real medical breakthrough information, they would be flaunting it publicly for the money. They are liars and put lives at risk for their own benefit. Natalie says, hit the likes, friends. This is awesome. Wine and watch. Yes, tell us what you're drinking. We're not going to report you this time. We won't report you. Ryan says, it is a case of these men trying to take away our body anatomy, keep us spinning on the hamster wheel. Yeah, exactly. When I was at Bethel, they kept you on the hamster wheel. You work in the morning, 7 to 5. Well, you start morning worship at 7. You be at work at 8, 8 to 5. You get out of work, you have to go to your meetings or you have to prepare for talks. There were so many talks to give. I gave so many talks in my lifetime. And then Saturday, you work a half a day, 4 hours. Then you're encouraged to go out and field service with the friends in the local congregation. And Sunday, you go to the meeting and then you're out in field service. So it's a vicious cycle and it keeps you so focused on watchtower material that you don't have time for critical thinking. And critical thinking is what has united most of us here on this live.
Remember some of those principles. We know that many of our parents would like to see a situation where a doctor would come in and give a 100% guarantee that he will not transfuse their child during the medical or surgical procedure. But as we also know, most doctors, based on their medical and also their legal understanding, are not going to be willing to give that 100% assurance. But now what if the parents, the HLC, is able to locate a physician who has many, many years of experience? This doctor has cooperated with witness families for many, many years. In fact, perhaps he's done this same procedure over and over again, and he has never used transfusion, or perhaps very seldom ever.
Brian says all day you can't keep your thoughts straight. And studying scripture says they did that to my younger sister about 30 years ago. Sorry to hear that.
Use transfusion. And now when he meets with the parents, he tells them, I feel very confident that I'm going to be able to do this procedure in your child, and I don't anticipate any problems. Well, given the circumstances, the parents may decide that this is the best option that they have. And they may decide that they can grant permission for the treatment to proceed without feeling that they have compromised their faith.
Wow, that's just amazing. Natalie says, and that's probably wasn't enough. As a good for nothing slave, you can always do more. Exactly, that's the spirit.
What about the situation of mature minors or mature adolescents? Well, we know that many doctors are willing to respect the wishes of adult patients, but at times, in certain jurisdictions of the country, different places, a mature adolescent may be given the same rights as an adult to make their own medical decisions and even to refuse blood transfusions. In some cases, there's a fixed age for this, but in other places, there isn't. Sometimes it's based solely on mature thinking ability of the young person. Sometimes, even if this has not been enshrined in the law of the state, some courts have recognized that mature adolescents do have this right to make their own decisions, but only when those adolescents are able to articulate their wishes and show that they really are able to make a mature decision. Maybe you remember the June 15th, 1991 issue of the Watchtower, page 17. There was a beautiful...
Of course, we remember the 1991 Watchtower. It stands out so prominently.
Account of a 12-year-old girl who was being treated for leukemia. The judge interviewed that girl and asked what her opinion was. Well, the girl said that she would scream, she would struggle, she would pull out the lines. And because of the way she expressed herself, the judge said, I refuse to make any order which would put this child through that ordeal.
Do you guys remember the Watchtower that had, I think it was this one he's referring to, that had all the young kids on the front? How many of you actually remember that? Natalie says, I wish we could put the Muppet picture in the chat.
With this patient, the treatment proposed by the hospital addresses the disease only in a physical sense. It fails to address her emotional needs and her religious beliefs. Imagine at 12, her wishes were respected as a mature minor because of the articulate way she was able to express herself. But on the other hand, if a young person is not able to express...
J-Dub says, yeah, I love when they quote old Watchtowers and say, we all remember the blah, blah Watchtower. Exactly. James says he remembered. Jay says mature adults and minors all die from this cult's manipulation. Studying scripture says some reason why there are children suicide bombers.
Himself. Doctors are going to treat them just as though they were an infant. In one case that's mentioned in that same article, the June 1591 Watchtower, there was a young man who was just 7 weeks away from the age of majority when he would be able to make his own decision.
Yeah, they like to give those illustrations and those experiences to get you sucked in. Natalie says those kids that lost their life are heroes. Sick. Those kids didn't get a chance, a choice. Renee says he likes the sound of his own voice. He is nothing but a salesman. That's all.
But when when the judge interviewed him and asked him why was it he did not want a blood transfusion, he couldn't explain it. In fact, the judge asked him the names of the first 5 books of the Bible, and he couldn't give them. Well, what did the judge say? He said, his refusal to consent to blood transfusion is not based upon a mature understanding of his own religious beliefs. And the boy was transfused. Well, what does that show? What a wonderful responsibility parents have to teach their children, to use the family study as an opportunity to explain things in such a way that the children can.
So the kid shows up refusing a blood transfusion and doesn't even know why. That sounds so familiar, right? Natalie says he's so proud about their deaths. Exactly.
Make a defense of their faith so as to avoid a situation like this. Well, now let's change gears one last time and talk for a few minutes about some of the legal concepts and concerns of the state in relation to the treatment of infants and young children. What is the presumption of the law with regard to parents and their children? Well, it's always assumed that parents are going to make the very best decisions for their children. They have a natural and a legal right to make medical decisions on behalf of their children.
Okay, Rick says HLC purpose is to ensure you die faithful and don't have a moment of weakness and want to live after all. If you chose life, you get shunned. That's a deep point. So this matter of blood transfusion, depending on how you take your choice, right? You could end up being shunned, like our dear friend Michael that lost his life.
But of course, there are certain limitations to this. Many countries have established laws as well as child protection agencies to protect children from abuse and neglect. And certainly we have no objection to those arrangements because we don't want to see any child be abused or neglected. But now, when doctors want to transfuse one of our children by going to a child welfare agency.
Did you notice, right? For those of you that are just coming in, this is Mark Sanderson. He's a member of the governing body, the top seat in the organization. And he just said, you heard it out of his mouth, this is not apostate material. You're listening to a member of the governing body saying that they want to protect children. But last week on Wine and Watch, we looked at the actual court documents of Deborah Hines, and they deny, dismiss her case, throw her case out. That's their position. When you look at the document, you don't see love. You don't hear anything about the voice of Jesus. You hear, judge, dismiss her case. You don't find anything in there about her being one of our dear sisters and we want her back in the flock and use the scripture about finding that one sheep, right? No.
What can we do? Or when they want to go to the court, what can we do to protect ourselves? Well, if you only take 1 point home, please take this one.
Yeah, take home this 1 point. J-Dub says, shunned or die. Nice choice, right? Terrible. Ryan says, then why are they making those decisions if it should only be for the parents? Jim Tanner says, meanwhile, he has his secret offshore account. Wow. Amazing.
That is contact HIS. Contact HIS. When there begins to be some word that the doctors are going to seek a court order or they're going to go to the Child Protection Agency. That was mentioned in the letter to all HLCs dated April 17, 2002. If there's time, it would be very advisable to seek the help of an attorney. In some cases, the court will even appoint an attorney to assist the family. Now, if the family doesn't retain an attorney or one is appointed, again, we want to get in touch with HIS because the legal department at the branch has information that they can share with the attorney that will help them to make the best possible defense of the family when they're in court. Now, what's going to happen? It's good to have just a general idea of the process that's going to take place if this does go to court or if it goes to a child.
Jim says, thank goodness for child protection in some of these states. Exactly. Jay says, that's what I was saying earlier, not his HIS.
Welfare agency. So first, the doctor is going to claim that a blood transfusion is needed to preserve the life and health of the child, and that the child is not mature enough to give consent, and that the parents refuse to give consent for this necessary legal medical procedure.
You see how he flubbed? He said necessary legal. Oh, I mean medical. The truth is coming out. Renee says all they care about is litigation. Natalie says this is why I tell all medical doctors the Jehovah Witnesses policies. I have access to a lot. Keep telling teachers, doctors, anyone you have access to about the hidden policies. Ryan says the fact that the government needs to step in to save your child should be ringing alarm bells. Exactly.
Now, to overcome, point two, to overcome the refusal of the parents, the doctor is going to seek either approval from a court or from the child welfare agency, depending on the law of the state where you live. Invariably, this results in the parents being charged with medical neglect or with abuse in order to be able to get the court order. Third, the judge is asked to grant an order to either transfer the custody temporarily to another person or just to give the doctor the authority to go ahead and give the transfusion. Well, now, what is our defense? How are we going to defend ourselves under these circumstances? Well, we have to go back to the point that when we refuse to grant a blood transfusion for our children, it is not abuse and it is not neglect. And this is for three important reasons. I'll go through them one by one with you. Here's the first one. The parents are not refusing medical care. In fact, they were no doubt the ones that brought the child to the hospital. The only thing that they're refusing is the blood transfusion.
It's that simple, huh? J-Dub says, I don't know how these elders can have this on their hands. Exactly.
Just that one medical intervention. And third, the parents want to have the opportunity to find doctors or institutions who are willing to treat the child using medical alternatives to blood transfusions, ways and means to avoid a transfusion. Well, despite all of the efforts that are made, it's a kindness on your part to prepare the family to face the reality that despite even the best of defenses that are made in court, in most cases, the judge is going to go ahead and grant the court order to transfuse unless one of these three things is true. Here's the first one. We've found a cooperative doctor who's willing to treat the child without blood. And he shows the judge that he has the ability to treat this in a responsible way. Number two, if we can convince the judge that there is no immediate emergency, it's not a life-threatening situation.
Wow, can you believe that? That is crazy. So now you're going to convince the judge that this is not a life-threatening emergency. That's crazy. Jay says, yes, they are refusing some medical care. Renee says, despicable man.
Or number three, if we can convince the judge to order the doctor to exhaust all of the different alternatives before considering giving a donor blood transfusion.
I can tell you from a personal experience, especially with my mother, there's very little time to go through all of these processes and retain your life. When you drag it out, dilly-dallying around, you often lose people. And that's why earlier when Lloyd Evans was interviewing that brother that was serving at Bethel previously, he said thousands are dying. And you see why. They have all these what we call magic tricks or manipulation just to get around taking blood. But in the interim, many die.
Well, ideally, as HLC brothers, we want to try to avoid going to court whenever possible. If there's any way around it, we want to avoid it.
Jay makes a great point. Thanks, Jay. He says they used to refuse organs because they said it was cannibalism. J Dub says that was a great point and absolutely great.
And one thing that you brothers all have is your life experience, you have your warm smile, you have your good people.
Okay, so no medical qualifications. Did you hear what he just said they had? They have a warm smile and they have their life experience. Here, your loved one, your child, infants, small kids, lying in the hospital bed, needing a blood transfusion, and these guys come in offering a smile and their life experience.
People skills, use all of those things.
Oh, and don't forget about the people skills. Oh, yeah. You have to use those people skills because that's going to, especially the people skills that they use in the judicial committee, because that teaches them how to ask the right questions, right? Exactly.
To reason with the doctor and try to get him to avoid that blood transfusion. Or
Ryan says, use your charm to kill kids. How terrible. Jay says, any way around. It pisses me off. Rochelle says, I remember that. Studying scripture says all of this bullshit expose how much damage is caused by man who are busybodies, who meddle in the affairs of others. Now studying scriptures, you know what the scripture says about meddling in other folks' affairs. They are terrible. Jay says, personal attention gets people a long way.
going to court to seek an order to transfuse. If there's any way around it, we want to avoid it. At the same time, keep working with the child welfare people, with the social workers, and help them not to be just a rubber stamp approving every request that a doctor might have for a blood transfusion. Educate them as to what the alternatives are so that perhaps they can even work with us and ask the doctor, well, have you exhausted all the alternatives first? Before they would ever consider going to a judge. Direction that's provided both by HIS and by the legal department can help you, brothers, so much to work for the very best possible outcome in these very, very difficult situations. So by employing all of the suggestions that
J-Dub says, avoid saving a child's life the easy way. Jay says, bullseye of his forehead. And Alex says, give likes to Watching the World. Thanks. Say, I appreciate that. That's awesome. Natalie says, hi, no doctor would entertain this crap. They're having the staff reporting them to child protection, arrogant governing body. And studying scripture says, my posts are delayed. Sorry. On our Wine and Watch, we're not looking for perfection. It could be delayed. The main thing is that you came out studying scriptures and you're connecting with people in the comment section. That's what this is all about. We're not giving any talks here or trying to be perfect. We just want to get to know each other because we can do a lot together because there's a lot of work that has to be done. Natalie says, educate them with window cleaning skills. Exactly. J-Dub says, I love your comments, Natalie.
we've discussed very briefly today, we can work to manage these pediatric and neonatal cases in the framework of the existing laws and make sure that the children that we love so much get the medical care that they need.
Oh, wow. So they're so concerned about the children. Let's see. J-Dub says, and impress them with your smile. Yeah, so there's a lot of good advice, right, that he gave to those brothers on the HLC for them to go out and win the crowd with their smiles and with their kind words and with their life experience. Meanwhile, people are fighting for their lives. A baby already sick, needing a blood transfusion, and they're offering recommendations to put the baby out in the sun and so forth. Jay says medical care. We want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. We had a big crowd. We had people from all over the world in different countries here. We had someone from Germany, Australia. It's beautiful to see everyone coming together, and I'm starting to see that many in the audience are getting to know each other, and I think that that's beautiful. That's a great thing. And even though, right, J Dub, this was so disgusting in regards to Jehovah's Witnesses stance on blood, and it really affects people. James says that he's from St. Lucia. Thanks, James, for showing up. We appreciate it. So, just as a recap, because I probably won't cover it much anymore, but I do want Michael's name to ring on forever because he lost his life to suicide. And if anyone is having thoughts in a similar way, we would like to recommend that you reach out to get help, to get the proper help that you need because life is so important and so valuable. One thing we learned from Michael is that the Jehovah's Witnesses do not have a stop button. They keep pressing and pressing. And when the man is pushed off the edge to the breaking point, they have these ways of trying to reconcile why it wasn't their fault as to why he would take his life. And I even saw someone in my comment section say, and this person is an active Jehovah's Witness, and I do welcome all the Jehovah's Witnesses. A lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, a lot of elders follow this channel. We even have a few Bethelites to check in. That's a great thing. But I heard someone in the audience say something to the effect that his death had nothing to do with being shunned. It's just that people are geared that way because of their own personal feelings or demons. You see how that person is so insensitive and they have no respect for the brother, the guy that was used to be their brother about a year ago. They've already cast him off as being an agent of the devil. You see how that works? And let me tell you something for those of you that are not Jehovah's Witnesses, it's one thing that when people commit sins in the Jehovah Witness faith, if you commit certain sins, then they disfellowship you. Or in the case of Michael Jackson, I understand maybe he was disassociated. So in other words, he told him he wanted out himself. But even that has changed over the years. So you never really know what the exact deal is. In the case of Michael, it wasn't, from what I'm gathering, I don't know the hard facts, but I'm going off of what he said in the video. It wasn't that he went out and committed some grave sin or they caught him like, some of the Bethelites. I tell you stories about going to strip clubs and doing all sorts of crazy things. We had a Bethelite um, that was at Bethel over 20 years at Walk Hill, and he went down to Middletown and he tried to solicit a 12-year-old boy. That's what the newspaper said. You can find that on the channel. That's not what Michael did. That same brother was over in the O'Hara, Chicago airport, nude on his knees, and they have him on camera. And this guy went back and to Bethel. That's where he lived. I knew the guy. He was a mechanic working on people's cars. He was actually I believe, a Bethel elder. That's not what Michael did. Michael simply, one of the things that woke him up, he watched the Royal Commission with Jeffrey Jackson, who was a governing body member, and he saw some of the untruths or what he interpreted as untruths that most of us interpret as untruths, right? And he says to the brothers, how could this be? How could this man stand up there and tell the Royal Commission lies and tell them things that are not a true reality for the regular rank and file Jehovah's Witness? He said, how could that be? And you know what the elders say, right? And I don't know the exact facts, but I can tell you how this game is played out. Well, you just have to trust the organization and you have to wait on Jehovah, right? That's the go-to words of comfort that they give to each and every individual. So Michael had an issue with the doctrine and the example that he saw a governing body member setting, and it didn't line up. It's like with myself, before I went to serve at Bethel, I only knew what I read in the Watchtower. So when I went to Bethel and I saw racism, and I told the brothers, I'm like, why is this guy yelling at us? He can't yell at us. Here's a Watchtower to say he shouldn't be yelling at us. This ain't no Jim Crow situation, right? The brothers on the back end called that guy up and say, hey, man, you had some guy in here complaining, saying that you yelling at people. Ha, 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 ha. And so at that moment, early on in my career, I started to realize how this thing is not lining up. And so, see, that's what happened with Michael. It didn't line up. It didn't make sense. And when he brought it up to the elders, they basically turned their back on him. And then they lined him up to get disfellowship when they called that judicial committee meeting. So it's definitely something to think about, how Michael had a change of mind because of what he saw and how the brothers were slanting the truth. And then if you fast forward to now, Michael is gone. So this is a very serious situation. And I just want to close out this live with this statement. I made a very condensed video about Michael that only basically talks about how he felt. In the video, I state that he committed suicide, and it just happened, right? That's a great video for you to share to officials and people in high places. Share it, share it, share it, because we need to raise awareness about people like Michael. Don't let Michael die in vain. And especially like in Norway, Australia, New Zealand, Scotland, all of these countries that I've been covering, this started because of one or two people reaching out to the officials and saying, listen, this religion practices shunning. Do you know what that means? Shunning? Well, I think that's something about you can't go around somebody. I think I knew about. No, no, no. This is what shunning means. And then they give an example. And then the officials is like, well, what kind of caveman mentality is going on in this religion? We have to take a look. So it all started in Norway. In one of my videos I showed you, it started with letters that were written by two Jehovah's Witnesses and a person that wasn't a witness, right? So, or ever a witness, but these people reported it, and the Jehovah's Witnesses, they lost 2 million a year that they were receiving from the government, unrighteous riches, right? That's what they would tell you. They lost all of that funding. So a lot of great things are happening for people like Michael. The voices are being heard, but do share the video, because many times when you try to tell people certain things, they always have a way of trying to brush you off. Oh, you're just making it up. Oh, you're an apostate. Well, Michael is a very clear case. He sat on that couch and he told you what happened and why it happened. And now Michael is no longer here. So let each and every one of us keep pushing forward. I appreciate all of you in the comment section. I look forward to seeing you guys next week on Wine and Watch. I think it's a good thing for us to get together and get to know each other, because we all share information. And I appreciate the people. I started off and I showed you how there are some people that send me emails pretending to be Bethelites and all sorts of games they play. But throughout all of that, we do have sincere people who are looking to make a difference. And that's what we want to do. And any of you guys that want to reach out to me, I'm here. I talked to a couple people today. I think in scriptures, I spoke with him today. We had a long, nice conversation. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know you guys. And I think together we're going to make a big difference here in the United States, just like what's happening in other countries. And the thing to keep in mind when you talk to these officials, tell them about Norway, tell them about New Zealand. Ask them, why aren't you doing something here in the United States? Tell them about Michael Pencava and Colin Scott and how basically they receive a slap on the wrist for something where they caused a young girl to be molested for 12 years. So, in conclusion, I want to say thank you. Thank you for coming out and thanks for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Same time, same place. And there'll be other videos along the way. But stay focused and let's keep pushing. Thanks for tuning in to the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe if you like the material. And you guys have a great night.